Inspiring Uganda.
Lampedusa Island is a strategic focal point in the central Mediterranean Sea. Once renowned as a top holiday destination, Lampedusa now serves as a gateway for cross-Mediterranean irregular migration to Europe in pursuit of better opportunities. However, the journey is fraught with peril. Many immigrants have tragically lost their lives in capsized boats, highlighting the dangers they face. In Uganda, a similar narrative unfolds. Approximately 500 boys and girls depart from Entebbe International Airport daily, bound for the Middle East in search of greener pastures. But what awaits these young people in the Middle East? Do we take stock of their welfare, and do we have bilateral relationships with these countries for accountability? Is the Exodus a new form of modern-day slavery? Join Timothy Nyangweso as he explores the challenges and opportunities our young people face on your favorite weekly program, Behind the Headlines, this Wednesday at 10 p.m. on your public broadcaster, UBC, Inspiring Uganda. Don't miss.
Good evening and welcome to Behind the Headlines. My name is Timothy Nyangweso. The story of labor externalization has been here for the past decade. When we talk about inhumane treatment, abuse, and various things that happen there, a lot of questions are put before it. A lot has been done as measures, especially in terms of policies, MOUs, or bilateral agreements, but the sting of abuses and treatment have still silenced all the good stories that come from there. The biggest question is, what are these agreements for? Who do they benefit? At the end of the day, if we see organ trafficking, organ harvesting, and various abuses happening to the different people that are there. But there's still success stories in those areas. That's the discussion tonight when we discuss the cause, the effect, and the remedies to labor externalization that keeps going up year in, year out. We'll be giving you the numbers, especially in terms of the remittances. Let's meet the panel. On my immediate left, Professor Sarah Sali, a dean at the School of Women and Gender Affairs. She's always here to discuss the perspective of what society needs moving forward. Good evening, Professor.
Good evening, Timothy, and good evening, our viewers.
Next is Dr. Kathy Mbide, who is the acting manager at Makerere University's Innovation Pod, but also a lecturer in the Marketing and Management Department. Good evening.
Good evening.
It's good to have you.
Thank you.
Next to her is Honorable Lubega Medad Segona, Member of Parliament representing the people of Busiro East and a member of the National Unity Platform, a lawyer at that. Good evening, sir.
Good evening to you, Timothy, and the panelists and the viewers out there.
Finally, Honorable Captain Francis Edward Babu, a senior citizen and a veteran politician. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Timothy, and thank you very much for inviting us. You know, today I read something interesting. It's a World Health Day for the
teeth.
Yes.
The gum.
Yes, no, for brushing your teeth.
Yeah, oral hygiene.
The oral hygiene. It's now the World Health Day. So I said, when I go there, I must talk about it.
Yes.
It really makes a lot of sense that we should brush our teeth and look after them.
So, you can be part of the show. We're waiting for one more panelist who will be joining us in a short while, and then I'll introduce him then. You can be part of the show. Go to our YouTube channel, #UBC Behind the Headlines. Let us know what you think. Or our X platform, #UBC Behind the Headlines. You can also use the number 0709 60 25 92. Let us know what you think by text or WhatsApp on that number. Let me give you some numbers here that really caught my ear. These are numbers given to us by Civil Aviation Authority. In 2020, the year of COVID then, 200 young people left the country. In 2021, the number shot up to 2,100. In 2022, the number was 64,000, and that was between Jan and August of that year. Of the 64, 59,000 were young ladies. The remittances that came in these periods, 2018, $300 million. In 2019, $600 million. In 2021, between $900 million and $1.2 billion. We're talking about between 4.4 trillion and 5 trillion shillings. That is remittances that come in between the Gulf and the Middle East as remittances back to the country. So let me start with Professor. Professor, when you hear labor externalization and you hear all these gruesome stories, I'll give you perspective in some other things that I've found out, especially communicating with people that are both in the UAE and Saudi. But when you hear this, what comes to mind?
Wow. Thank you, Timothy. I think one of the things that comes to mind, you're forced to ask yourself, when you hear the gruesome stories, one is to ask yourself, under what circumstances did these people go? Okay? How come they are happening? Who is in charge? Who is managing? Because when you hear the gruesome stories, especially when you see the video clips, it is people, you can clearly see a culture clash. People, I think, are promised different things. They're coming from a different context, and they go to this context, and the expectations of the employer in the Gulf does not meet with the expectation of the employee. Some tell stories of having been duped, having been deceived. Others tell stories of their passports having been withdrawn. Others. So the question is, under what agreement did they go? We know in this country, there are registered companies that are monitored and regulated by the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development. So we assume that those that go through those kinds of companies are well catered for and are well regulated. But we also know that there are very many other channels through which people go. We know of many other Ugandans who leave Uganda and go via Kenya. Okay? So then you cannot tell under which jurisdiction they are going and whether the Kenyan government laws are covering them. So the key thing is, under what circumstances do they go? Because the stories we hear are gruesome, but from what you have read, it seems like it's not all doom and gloom. In terms of revenue, the revenue is coming back. So the mismatch then is, how come we have such a good story with regard to revenue, and then it does not match with the stories we hear that are gruesome? Is there an exaggeration somewhere? Is there a lack of, but we've seen some of the people who have suffered. So are they isolated cases? But generally the picture is of people who go and they don't seem to have protection. They don't seem to have clear understanding of who should protect them. And it looks like there's an abuse of their rights, because if they tell you they're not allowed to pick phones, so their phones are withdrawn, then they tell you their passports are withdrawn immediately on arrival, so they're in a way rendered stateless. And yet, labor externalization in itself should not be a bad thing if it's regulated, because we have, and I know you only counted people, revenue from the Gulf, but there's revenue from the US and Europe, where skilled people, professional people are going and working, and they are returning with money. So if it is well regulated and it's professional and it's highly skilled, there is no problem. So the problem seems to be where people are going, they are semi-skilled or they are unskilled for the jobs they are, but maybe the middleman who connected them also didn't reveal enough. So basically, the key questions are around, under what terms did they go?
And I'm glad you've said that, Professor, even as I get to Dr. Catherine, because today I made effort to communicate with as numerous people, both in the UAE or Myanmar or India, to hear what the thing is. Because what I found out is, and I hope Honorable Segona can put perspective to the legalities there. Let me come to you, Dr. Catherine. What I heard is that there's a contract signed by a recruitment company here, which tells them 1,500 dirham. When they get there, they're told between 900 and 1,000. Something else, they also sign another contract. For jobs like cleaning, security, and domestic workers, they're put in a dormitory. What are the drivers of young people, having this influx of young people leaving the country to go there? The other statistic I got from one of them is that the number of job seekers in the UAE now is up by 500,000. What is leading? What are the drivers of our young people, especially these young people in our country?
Thank you, Timothy. I think that is quite important for us to analyze, even before we get into the aspect of externalization. Where are these young people coming from? What has happened in our homes? We need to also go back and study our families. okay, where these young people are coming from. Is there an organized, or because we hear there are some aspects where young people are promised right away from their homes and families, you know. Someone promises a young girl deep down in the village that you'll be exposed to this kind of environment. So, and then this young girl or young boy at the home, there are no families, there are no parents. So this person promising them, or an agent, comes in like an angel, you know, to actually go ahead and promise them, you know, the good things, the nice labor, you know. You're going to board the plane. Because if we go back and try to study and analyze these young people, what are those factors driving them to even accept? One, the families do not exist anymore. You know, we have a breakdown of the family structures where they belong. You know, there are no shocks in the communities to support them. There are no support systems, you know, to support these young people. You know, no one is even looking at this. Many of them, when you try to look into the age bracket, these are child-headed homes, okay? So there is no alternative to, you know, to livelihood, and it becomes easy to exploit them, to promise them. And the next thing is they're accepting to come to Kampala, then driven or taken to. Now you are talking about a contract. The young person they are taking cannot even interpret this document. The statements, the details, the terms, okay? They may be promised $1,500, but they can't even interpret, or in terms of an exchange rate, they don't even know what 1,500 is. But someone would tell them that, yes, you're going to be earning 800,000 now. Earning 800,000 from nothing is a blessing in disguise, okay? So they are not even aware of the kind of environment. The other key driver is lack of exposure. They are not aware of what is likely to happen. They have not traveled, they have not been exposed. No one has even told them a story in their family. So with that lack of exposure, you basically go in to explore. And the other thing is they are young. They have not seen any challenges in, you know. So the drive, the inner drive, their personality to be able to say, I think let me just go and see what happens. Or I would also love to board a plane. Yeah? Because some of them travel and they can't even speak the languages where they are going to. Some of them, yes, we are talking about illiteracy, but they can't even speak an English word. You find a young girl trying to look for, you know, can't even read their boarding pass, okay? Is trying to struggle to see whether they are boarding to, you know, which is their destination, and there's someone trying to support them now. That is also a challenge. They are illiterate. These terms and conditions, they can't understand, they can't interpret. So we are looking at the entire ecosystem, okay? Were they really informed by the agency back home? How are the other individuals interpreting the magnitude of the language interpretation? In Uganda, where we have more than 50 languages, someone is coming from Acholi, the other one is coming from the Western, one is coming from Buganda. They all understand their own languages. But they are going into an economy, into an environment where they must use English, okay? Now, this document binding them, they don't understand. They can't even interpret the basics. So now that one also becomes a very huge challenge for these young people to basically make informed decisions. They cannot make such decisions that can, you know, help them to be able to get into the right opportunities and make good assessment.
Who is supposed to help them with that? You make valid points, Dr. Catherine, but who is supposed to be helping them with this? Especially, you're talking about the literacy, the high population growth in this country, all those are drivers to labor externalization, but who is supposed to be helping them in this area?
Yeah, we are looking at, obviously, the main key agency here is government. We have the Ministry of Labor. Now, there are these agencies, these policies, you know, as these young girls, the young boys are recruited, taken into maybe for training, pre-training, before they actually on board or travel. But what happens? Do we know where this young girl is coming from? What is the nature of her home? What is her background? Can we build maybe systems? It's an entire ecosystem working together. Okay, she can't interpret this document, but you would ask yourself: are the agencies literate? Are they even competent enough to develop these contracts? Okay, because we may blame a girl who cannot, but are the agencies literate, competent to also interpret the contracts? Because now she's moving from one level where she is promised $1,000 in Uganda, okay, but then she's going to get to an employer, okay, in Saudi, who also has other terms and maybe another currency. Okay, so at that point, it's the entire ecosystem. Are we bringing in the families? Are we bringing in the parents? Are we looking at schools? Some of these actually are got from schools, and they just elope. Okay, we could actually bring in a number of these players. The churches have a role to play. Our members of parliament have a role to play. So the entire ecosystem around this child, okay, if it's government, if it's civil society, what is the role? Can someone really interpret these terms and conditions? Then yes, to really help this beneficiary.
I'm glad you said everyone has a role to play. Let me come to Honorable Segona. Honorable, what do international labor laws stipulate, especially about labor externalization, before we even get into the bilaterals? What do they stipulate on labor moving from one country to another, and what safety measures are there?
Well, thank you. First, I've been a member of the technical committee, working committee of the World Health International Labour Organization. And one of the key things we have been advocating for previously has been to create a uniform system that respects labor rights, promotes what we call best practices in the labor movement, in the labor industry across the globe. But one thing, unique thing you need to know about labor, about international law, is that people must sign and accept to be bound or governed by those international norms and regulations. Now you're going to find most of the countries where we have these troubles, they are not signatories and they are not members of the International Labour Organization. So it comes back to the bilateral practices and relations, which is basically about you having the protection of your country, you having and enjoying the protection of your constitution through governmental action. I think Cassie talked about where the role of everybody, including MPs, etc. Now we made the law for you. The minister has made regulations that give effect to externalization of labor. How they are enforced and implemented is a different matter. And it takes us back to bilateral relations and bargaining powers. Bargaining powers both of the individuals that you have nicknamed Kadama and the country, and your government. Because of your limited bargaining abilities, your children continue to suffer. Why, for example, the government of Uganda cannot coerce a foreign state, especially a richer one, to abide by certain principles, laws, and standards. That's point number one. Point number two is about informality. How many of those people that are going there will go through the legitimate, lawful governmental channels? I think, as Professor Sally said, you find quite a number go through Kenya. Somebody leaves Entebbe or goes through Busia saying, I'm going to Kenya. And you know what they do? Because it is possible to travel between Uganda and Kenya using your national ID, they hide their passports. So at immigration, nobody will look at their passport to see their final destination. At some point, immigration here confiscated a number of girls' passports. Why? Because on searching them, they were saying they are going to Kenya, but hidden in their bags were their passports with UAE etc. passports. And that's the time when government had suspended that influx of labor into the Middle East. Now, talking about bargaining power, if you go to countries like, I think, Philippines and others, they have bilateral arrangements, they have agreements with the Arab countries where they export their labor. They have regularized and streamlined the externalization of labor to the extent that there is a minimum wage that is already agreed between the states. They have agencies or consulates, we call them consulates, and in those consulates they have specific officers whose responsibility is purely to look after the welfare of their countrymen and women. Now for us, we have some officers. When you go to UAE, you have them in Abu Dhabi. I'm not very sure, since the shadow minister is here, I am not very sure whether we have them in all those countries, especially which are the source of trouble with immense respect to where people complain much. You're talking about Oman, you're talking about Saudi Arabia, etc. I remember a day when the Honorable Muhammad Mwanga Chivumbi brought that issue on the floor of Parliament. I can tell you, first of all, the government reaction was so bad. Speaker Kadaga tried to force him to withdraw, and Mwanga Chivumbi refused. The president was appalled and said, how can that boy do that? Because, I think he was expecting some dealings with those countries. Finally, like Kathy said, what are the drivers? We must all accept that in a world of unemployment, it is understandable, it is a natural reaction for young people to look for jobs elsewhere, because the world has become a global village. And they have also seen, because there are also success stories, even in those countries we are talking about. There are some success stories. Somebody says, or you're able to see, when this person left, he was able to send money, bought a plot of land, constructed a house, was able to pay school fees for her siblings or her children, has been sending money to her husband to look after the family, especially as a member of parliament around this metropolitan area. These are things I interface with on a daily. Then you go to things like, I think Professor Sarah talked about the issue of people who get there and get tortured. Yeah. The return of the bodies has also become another problem, where the claim is once somebody died or committed suicide or was killed, but we are not able to bring back the body. You can talk about these middlemen companies. I don't know if they are middlewomen also. These companies which do the brokerage. Now, first and foremost, when they do the brokerage and they have this agreement and the contract is breached from UAE or elsewhere, it becomes very difficult to enforce the agreement here. This agreement is a brokerage agreement. I have put you in touch with the employer. What business do I have with you? We've been pushing them. You go to them, tell them, bring back this person's body, but they are helpless. Remember, equally, these are agents. They're also looking for Meriarero, There's not much they can do as against the other companies. The language barrier, I think as they talked about it, as way back as 1975 when we had the employment decree, Idi Amin's government was alive to the fact that there is need to translate or interpret the contract of employment to somebody. This is a language problem. These are people who don't understand the English in which the contract is written here. But to make it worse, they go to another country where they speak Arabic, They can't understand what those people are doing. I think there is a lot we need to do. But even when we tell people that there are dangers, the drivers that push them into going cannot allow them to think twice. Why? Because the country itself is broke, the family is broke, the person is broke. What do you expect?
Honorable, have you been able to see some of these MOUs and bilaterals as a member of parliament?
Not so much as a member of parliament, but as a lawyer. I have seen them. They leave a lot to be desired.
Do they provide the same safety? Because the story I had from Philippines, especially when a domestic worker from the Philippines harmed a child, the government stepped in. Do these provide those safeguards for our young people that go out there?
They don't. They certainly do not. Otherwise, we would be far. Probably would not be talking about this. But even the little that is provided, honoring it becomes a problem. There are some of our children who go to these countries and they become sex slaves. Why? Because you have entered the country, as Sarah said, they have removed your passport, taken away your passport. You do not have a return ticket. You are vulnerable. You are at their mercy. I was told of 2 stories where one young man went and became a sex slave. They would just bring women for him to satisfy. His body became swollen and so on and so forth. And unfortunately, when he came here, his paternal auntie had stolen literally all the money he was sending. Now, there was also another story of a young lady who went and became a domestic worker in somebody's house. Now, the brother-in-law to the house, who is a soldier in that country, would occasionally visit and would forcefully seek and obtain sexual satisfaction from this young girl. She had no choice. You can't report. You don't have your passport. You do not have money to fly back. You don't even know where you are. So these are stories that need to be investigated by government by strengthening consular services where our children go.
Thank you. Thank you
And
very
of
much.
course, continuing advisory. We should be able to blacklist certain countries where the numbers of complaints are skyrocketing. Whether our children listen to us or not is a different matter, but we should make an effort as government.
Thank you very much. I would like to also recognize the presence of Honorable Nkunyinji Mwanda, who is also the Shadow Minister for Foreign Affairs and a Member of Parliament representing the people of Chadondo East. Good evening, sir, and you're very welcome.
Good evening, and good evening to the viewers.
I'm going to come back to you in a short while. Let me come to Captain Babu. Captain, when you look and hear all these horrific stories, let's not even just look at Uganda. Let's talk about the ones who are trying to cross the ocean. Some who have died, some who have tried coming back from Europe and all these things. Who do we hold accountable?
You will not understand this if you keep on treating it in piecemeals. You've got to look at the big picture and look at a little bit of the historical background of these issues. First and foremost, look at East Africa. Don't look at Uganda alone, because our relationship with the Arabian Peninsula is historical. As we talk right now, there are several people from Uganda before even this started. What you're talking about is very recent. But even before this one, there were people in this part of the world who were of the Arab descent in places like Iganga and all that area. And these people actually got jobs in the Middle East. And when you go to Dubai, you find a lot of them are in the police force. If you follow that line and you go all the way up to Mombasa, a lot of these people of the Arab descent were also recruited and they work in the Middle East. And the people from Zanzibar have a relationship with the people in Oman. The former Sultan came from Oman. And until today, that relationship goes on. Now, we have failed to look at how the Middle East came to start getting foreign employees. First of all, the population was small. They had money, and therefore they wanted workers. And the first nearest workers they had were Filipinos, people from Indonesia, people from India, people from Pakistan, and these are the people who went to the Middle East. And not only that, they actually intermarried with the Arabs. Now, one thing people have never really wanted to talk about, and I'm sorry, I'm not going to be naive about it, is the relationship between a black man and an Arab, culturally. What is the relationship? I'll be very frank. The Arabs call us Al-Abdi, which means we are slaves. And time has come for us to speak the truth. And therefore, the treatment of people from Africa in the Arabian Peninsula is different from the treatment of the Filipinos and Indonesian in the peninsula. So that's the first point. The second point is externalization of labor has not started today. We have our people going to other countries apart from the peninsula, the Arabian Peninsula. We have people in the United Kingdom, we have people in the United States, we have people in Europe, we have people even as far as Australia. So our people, especially the skilled laborers, have got jobs outside. And they have been sending money in this country before this group you're talking about started going into the Middle East. Now, our neighbors have got certain skills. Because of Utali College, a lot of them are in the hospitality industry. And a lot of people from our neighbors have gone to that part of the world as skilled laborers in the hospitality industry. Are you with me? So let us now examine where this other group of the unskilled laborers come in. And I think this is where it becomes very important. First and foremost, even before you talked about your international laws, the laws they have made in Parliament, people have been going to the Middle East in one way or the other to work there. Our specialized doctors have worked in the Middle East successfully, and lecturers. I wanted you to get this point. And some of our best doctors have worked there, but they've been recruited from Britain, not from here. When I was first recruited to go and work in Saudi Arabia, I was not recruited from Africa, I was recruited in Britain. And they have different levels of payment. United States is the highest, Europe is second, and Africa is third. They have their methods. You either take it or you leave it. So first of all, we've got to understand who we are dealing with. And before we even send anybody there. Now, we have some very smart young people who want to have entrepreneurship and therefore form these agencies. They go there, they talk to a few people there, that they can give them cheap labor. Now, the other group we're talking about who used to go there, they went at a higher level, a higher class. And therefore people who employed people were of the educated class in that area. Now the lowest of the low started employing people. And that's why they get people from this part of the world. Nobody has examined this, but do examine it, please. You will find it so. Now, some of our very highly entrepreneurial groups actually do have businesses in Dubai and here. And they do have businesses in Bahrain and here. Our problem has been the externalization of labor went before we even made the laws. It was done before. So the laws followed what had already been done. The agencies started exploiting these young people. Now, Madam was talking about dollars. They're not talking about dollars, they're talking about dirhams, which is about 3.7 something per dollar. So when they say 1,500, you're really talking about maybe $400. So what these people do, the agencies are the ones who go and talk to the agency in the Middle East. They discuss. And it is there that the games of money is played. And how it is played, of course, the ones who go to work are the ones who suffer. Now, the level, these small things you are hearing, which are happening, is because the kind of level of the employers is so low. That's why they take people's passports. That's why they make them slaves. That's why they make them sexual slaves. That's why they make all these things happen. But our agencies here cannot say we are not part of it. And this business of saying, oh, we've given them to the other agencies, that's wrong. They should be responsible, and they should be taken to task. Now, before these young people are taken there, you feel pity for them. First and foremost, very quickly, although you called it that it is part of what is pushing, the population of this country has increased. We have 48 million people. Our Powerman survey, the labor survey, which has been done, shows that we need to get more, to create more jobs for our people. Now, but there are many who have also become school dropouts because of our economy. So a lot of things have happened. There are many forces that forced some of our people to go there. Now, the young people who are being picked around, these agencies, they go looking for all sorts of people, put them in hostels here, keep them for a few months. They sort of say they are training them. I don't know what they are training them about. And then take them, dress them up, and take them to the airport, and put them on an aeroplane, and all sorts of things. Now, I think the government of Uganda really should be responsible that no Ugandan should leave this country under supervision of, as far as I'm concerned, of people who are not reliable. Because these are our people. So these are unreliable people. And some of them are not reliable. But those ones who are not reliable, they take very good, they take them to very good markets. Those ones who are playing games, who are not very good, are the ones we are really talking about. Now, you quoted some money there. The money you quoted is from all over the world. It's not only from the Middle East. And the biggest amount of money that comes from here is not from those poor people. It is mainly from the United States and Britain. Yes. Those are the people who send here huge sums of money. Now, there are reasons why Dubai, the Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and so on, would want labor. And to do that, we need our government, like Honorable Segona has said, to really come out and have a good relationship with that government before we send our people there, so that the atmosphere is welcoming. And we must have the consulars, the one he's talked about. We do have consulars, we do. But are they trained to do this kind of work? Because you could be a consular in Dubai, or you could be a consular in Jeddah for people who are visiting. But are you really trained to do that kind of job, to look after people who are being employed there? So we need also trained people to do that kind of work. Lastly, before I finish, we've got to really tell our brothers and sisters of the Middle East that we are no longer slaves. We have independent countries, and some of our people are very highly educated, and they can work with them on equal basis. So they've got to take us of what we are. And they should not hide behind religion. There's a tendency I've seen in this part of the world. Every time we talk about this, somebody goes behind the religion. No. If we are taking people to be employed there, let them be Ugandans, but they must also be treated equally when they go there.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Honorable Nkunyinji, especially last year, you raised a lot of concern with 30 plus people that were in Myanmar. And this was something that was really, that you put on the floor of Parliament. I know that in 2018, Honorable Namboze brought it up also, especially with the young lady that came back. 2020, we had the same thing, but the peak was 2013, 2014. Honorable Babu has spoken about, them purporting us as slaves. Is this modern day slavery in your eyes?
Well, first of all, I want to be on record that the basic challenge in line with the labor externalization lies squarely with the legal regime. What Honorable Babu referred to as mutual good relations can only be actualized not by mere diplomatic exchange, because we already have with most of these countries, but the consistent lack of enforceable bilateral labor agreements between Uganda and most of these countries. As we speak, in most parts of the Middle East, which have been a center of concern, we don't have existing enforceable bilateral agreements on labor. That would determine the fate of those who are recruited from our country, their rights and remedies wherever issues of concern arise. Now, equally, with our domestic law, many times when we raise concern, we raise it to the Foreign Affairs Ministry, which legally has the diplomatic presence on behalf of Uganda in a number of these countries. But the trouble is that the domestic setup, gender and labor issues are placed under the Ministry of Gender. And equally, most budgets for and to do with labor and gender-related concerns are under the Ministry of Gender, which legally and internationally, as a ministry, lack of physical and diplomatic presence on the ground. Now, the regime and the system here tried to come up with regulations and guiding regulations, whereas the Ministry of Gender and Labor licenses labor recruitment firms locally. But when you read the regulations, the arrangement is in form of agent principle. It is a bit tricky for a victim to identify the responsible party, because we have agent principal relations between these companies, and the same arrangement has been exploited by lawfully registered companies locally here. For example, whereas we have, in some instances, legitimate work opportunities abroad, the Ministry of Gender ends at registering a company here. Under their regulations, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs verifies a company, a recruitment company, in a host country. That's the arrangement in place. And when they identify and validate a host company, the agent company here recruits a domestic worker or a worker and sends that worker to another host company in the host country. The Ministry of Gender only focuses on looking at the agreements between this Ugandan company and the other company, and in relation to a particular employee they want to externalize. In essence, a company that secures one job would advertise and get 1 million applicants. These companies will receive payment and will purport to process for all. We're aware that they have only one job. And in connivance with host companies there, they will recruit and even send. That's why when we go to those troubled countries, the reports we are getting is that these, mostly girls, are normally put in the resemblance of warehouses. You know, these are the factual issues in those countries. Whereas the arrangement under our laws here envisages that by the time one goes, because when you ask the Ministry of Gender, they will tell you there are processes here, which will look fine. You can easily get convinced that actually there is safe. I mean, it is very safe. Now, but in real practice, those host countries and these recruitment companies connive. They will have 1 or 2 jobs. When they advertise, they get so many applicants. And all these applicants will be received and processed. I don't know how they find templates of the same agreement. Now, the ministry only verifies these agreements in lieu of a verified company in the host country by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs or our embassies. Now, many of these workers are sent when actually there is no job. Much as they sign, there's a resemblance of a contract, there is no job, and they are operated in warehouses for a specified period of time. For the case of, for example, UAE, when time passes and the other host company can't secure a job, many times they chase them away from those warehouses to accommodate others who are new. Mm-hmm. We are also hearing narratives that those other host companies actually pay the Ugandan company to send them workers. And that has been the explanation whenever we seek to know why were their passports confiscated. A company will say, I paid for you. Now, this is a double tragedy. A domestic or a normal worker recruited in Uganda is told to pay a local company with a promise of a job. Reaching there, this worker will wait for a job for months and months until the worker is either chased out of that warehouse or gets tired and tries to look for options. And these people would always confiscate their passports. The explanation we given to these domestic workers, according to their narrative, is that they require them to pay a specified sum of money to those host companies before they release their travel documents. And that's why many times their travel documents are confiscated. And with the travel documents, I squarely mean passports. That is one of the challenges we have. That even where there are scenarios of legitimate job offers, many times it has been exploited for gains by domestic companies here, and the law favors them because validating external contracts is a bit tricky. They just based on the templates provided, and these companies use the same template for whoever they take. That's one challenge we have. And indeed, when you look at the Middle East, majority are middle-aged. Majority of the of the affected Africans, including Ugandans, are middle-aged. But we find some elderly among them. And 2, for a country like now, we don't have an enforceable bilateral agreement on labor. There are a few success stories here and there. But when you read them, the number of the victims, just last year, I visited 2 prisons in UAE, where we found in one prison called Al Awil, we found I think there were 3,000 Ugandans detained last year. Till the government of UAE gave them an option of only securing emergency travel documents and facilitating them to return home. Yes. Indeed, we pushed on the regime here to issue free travel documents, emergency travel documents, because majority of them never actually had travel documents. And we are claiming that these host companies confiscated them. in my interface, I've realized that even these host companies are not manned by citizens of those particular countries.
No.
For example, when you talk of UAE or Saudi, majority of these companies are managed by other nationalities, not actually those particular nationalities. We'll talk about Saudi, for example. You find that these companies, the host companies, are run by other nationalities who are migrants also in those companies. Yes. Because these countries have free trade. And they have no attachment to that host country. They are also business. They are just in business. It is actually business in those countries. The example for Saudi, for example, Uganda has a bilateral agreement with Saudi. We have tried to push for protective terms. Recently, they came up with a revised version of the bilateral agreement. That puts in place arbitration clauses involving the embassy and our diplomatic staff. But equally, within Saudi, with the little protection they have is that when you go as a domestic worker and you want to return, there are centers called Sakan centers, where domestic workers run and they are processed to return. And this is a private company. These are private companies hired to process return and protection for these girls wherever they have issues. But they only protect those who went there legitimately. Mm-hmm. And two, the laws there requires that the employer have to issue permission and clearance for you to return. That's why all those who escaped from work are now stuck in Saudi. They can't exit because the immigration system doesn't allow them to exit. But even those who are in Sakan, they complain on longer processing time. Last year when I was in one Sakan center in Riyadh, I left there 96 Ugandan girls who were reported to have been there for more than 2-3 years. And the reason is they are mad. Then another 500 who are detained and normal. And the explanation is they cannot process or do anything for those who are mentally capacitated. But we could not see any effort within our enabling externalization system to protect or safeguard, either to even follow up on the treatment of these particular victims. Just exiting Saudi alone requires clearance from the employer. Now they have put a new clause of trying to arbitrate involving the embassy. We are yet to test on how it works. But still we hear a lot of concerns and cases. But as well, those who run away from work cannot be protected and they can't exit because they need clearance from their employer. Our question has always been, if I go and I find I can't manage this particular work, why don't I reserve and retain the right to exit or to refuse a particular work? Now, you'll find some people being harmed and reporting work injuries because they are being forced to work as the only option. That's one of the challenges, even within our existing bilateral agreements. Where is the protection for these Ugandans? When you look at our exit points as a country, now, labor externalization borders trafficking. The victims have no control over our borders or any exit point. Indeed, some are trafficked. And the challenge is that the traffickers are partly the agents, these recruitment companies. When you interview most of the victims, they will say, the person who recruited me, I found the person at the company. Now, these people operate near the companies. They find a way of ensuring that this person exits. And they find a way of securing clearance, even at airports, whereas they don't have any clear documentation with the company. And in such cases, even the victim participates in the trafficking. He's told and questioned what to say at every point, with the hope that he or she is going for a better future. And many times when they find themselves in challenges, they have no paperwork at all. We also have such a category. So now, the question of labor externalization is actually a serious one. Just recently, a number of our nationals landed in Myanmar, formerly Burma. I raised it on the floor of Parliament, and we are yet to see the government's response and what they put in place to rescue these Ugandans. Now, these are for the case of Myanmar, these are professionals. These are professionals who are told they are good labor opportunities in Myanmar, popularly known as Burma. Now, actually, Taiwan. Thailand? Yeah, that they went to Thailand. Yeah.
No, they came from Thailand.
We are told they passed through Thailand and some UAE. That's the narrative we are getting. Now, when they reached Burma or Myanmar, they were received well and transported only to land that are only to land in rebel-controlled territories. They are not allowed to exit. And we are being told from their narrative that those who are professionals, mostly in IT, are told to hack into systems, banks, people, those you know. And if you have no result at the end of the day, you are beaten. Their exit is very problematic. Of course, when we quizzed the government to give a response, they talked of trying to initiate diplomatic engagement and also establish diplomatic relations with Myanmar. Okay. But the challenge we have is that the country called Myanmar, every region where these Ugandans are detained is controlled by a different rebel group, not actually the government. It's not the government of Myanmar in control of the areas where these Ugandans are detained. Now, this is also another troublesome case. But we have seen case studies of other countries negotiating with these rebels, finding what will speak out to them, and they have released their nationals. For Uganda, they are still stuck there and crying from the beginning to date. So these are some of the crucial challenges. But going forward, we are demanding for protective bilateral labor agreements.
And we're going to come to that, Honorable. Let's first leave it at that. Let me read some feedback. A lot of feedback coming through, especially on this. This is Innocent from Nebi District. Labor externalization to the Middle East is a mirror of the level of desperation in our country. It just shows the length at which Ugandans are willing to go to make ends meet. No matter the gruesome ordeals, they come from there. We still need survival. Do not forget that many graduates have had to go through to kickstart life after school. It's another betting season in there, okay? Good evening, Timothy. My name is Amoti from Fort Portal City. Labor externalization, when we discuss the causes, consequences, let's first ask ourselves, when did it start? Because in 1962 to 1986, it was very difficult for any youth uneducated to think about working in the Middle East and any other country where we did not have an embassy. It's amazing that among the employers in charge of external recruitment agencies, there's also fellow expatriate workers, and also we have expatriate workers and who also have illegal recruiting companies that stay longer there, okay? One more so that we can be able to take a break. Innocent Opio, good evening, Timothy. The quality of labor in Uganda that we're exporting is very poor. Low quality labor force. Imagine Uganda exporting 500 people like Professor Sarah. The caliber of this would bring in better current trends and people are going to be better paid. But we're sending maids, security guards. To me, this is modern day slavery, okay? Okay, I'll leave it at that. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be discussing remedies. We have discussed the causes and effects. Let's discuss remedies. What do embassies, or what are they supposed to do? This and more after this break.
ebiseera by'okuzaayo abaana mu masomero tebiteekwa kukaluubiriza n'akatono. Eno kusimba nnyiriri mpanvu, kano kalippagano ka bidduka. Simanya kuzunga na banka siripsi. Kati osobola okusasula school fees z'omwana wo ate n'okola n'ebirala ntoko ku ssimu ye ey'omu ngalo. Ekikola kyangu nnyo. Nyiga bunyizi *165*8 ogoberera ebikulagiriddwa oba okozese app ya MTN Momo. Ate kati okola ki olwaleero? MTN Mobile Money Uganda Limited erungamizibwa banka enkulu ya Uganda.
Nyati Motion Pictures brings you Tuko Pamoja, Peoples of Eastern Uganda segment. How have they negotiated the colonial border that divided the Luya nation into two countries?
The Vasamia, Babukusu, the Bagwe, the Bamasava, all belonging to the Valuya of Kenya.
The last man to be identified as a Mugisu was Masava.
He just emerged from the ground like a mushroom.
The confluence and hybridity of the peoples of the Great Lakes region come alive in eastern Uganda.
Of course, the true Baganda, they know that they originated in Mount Elgon region.
Share language with Bagwere.
Premiering on Saturday, the 23rd of March 2024 at the National Theatre from 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. To get a ticket, call 0778 787 660. Tuko Pamoja?
Juko. Yo. Check the shopping, man. What's your secret?
Haven't you heard of the parish development model, PDM?
Yes, I did, but I thought it was just a talk.
No, Sebatia. It is real. I and a few friends together formed a circle, accessed money from the PDM, invested in a portrait project, and now things are moving.
Joko. I thought I was one of your friends.
You are.
But you left me behind.
I didn't leave you in poverty. What you do, just visit your LC2 chairperson and your parish chief and start the process of economic transformation. Just like that. The parish development model is an initiative from the government of Uganda through the Ministry of Local Government designed to transform all lives of Ugandans for the better. PDM, my parish, my development, my life.
Welcome back from that quick commercial break here on Behind the Headlines. My name is Timothy Nyangweso. I'm joined by Professor Sarah, Honorable Nkunyinji, Dr. Kathy, Honorable Medad Segona, and Captain Francis Babu to discuss a very patent issue of labor externalization. And let's make it categorically clear. There is those that are very literate and very educated that really go to the universities and teach all these things. We also look at the ones that are semi-literate that also are making success stories. But then the ones that are really with their hands and have no skills are the ones that are causing issues wherever they go. Let me start with Professor. Professor, some of the things that have been mentioned, especially if you had Honorable next to you, very vehement, very passionate about what's happening in different countries there. But also we look at the rate of poverty in this country, we look at the unemployment, underemployment, look at the huge supply of young people that are available, and then we look at a very diminishing demand in these countries. What can we do to really balance this seesaw, bring balance to this area?
Wow, that's a very difficult one given what the drivers are, as members have explained. So given that the drivers are several, it means also the solutions have to be several. Well, I think population growth shouldn't be seen as a problem, but it can only be seen as an asset if we develop that population. If we leave things in free fall as they are, those who can afford educate their children, those who cannot afford, let them stay around, they will deal with beating snakes or chasing birds, then we are going to have a problem, especially given what colleagues have said. Most of those who are causing us problems or who are causing this kind of discussion are very poor, rural kids who have dropped out of school, okay? So one has to do, I don't want to recommend for population control because we have always, but it could be a solution, but we have always been told that we actually need more people in Africa. But the whole thing is we need to plan for the population properly. Whatever numbers you have, you need to plan for that population properly. The other thing is we are having this problem, as you've heard, because the opportunities to absorb them in whichever form they come are not forthcoming. And we're talking about the level of economic development in these countries. Here you're talking about a few girls who are going to the Middle East, in as much as they look many to us. If you look at the other Lampedusa, the video that you showed there, the stories that come across the Mediterranean crossings every day, and the number of people who die as they are crossing the Mediterranean. And we are told some of the coast guards of the countries they wish to go to simply perforate the boats because they don't want them. That is a signal that actually we need to pay attention to development of the continent. These aspects of us fighting endless wars, us fighting other people's wars, us being allowed or allowing other people to come and create causes here which are not our causes, but also us allowing other people to come and steal our resources is a problem. So the resources, the natural resources that would have developed the continent are not being used to develop the continent. A few of us are colluding with some people to steal those resources. That leaves Africa poor. The other thing is We are talking about natural, even this externalization of people through the different agencies that you've heard people speak here, that is a form of slave trade. So again, they're stealing natural resources, but this time they're stealing human beings. So whether they're taking them to Burma, whether they're taking them to Saudi or whatever, as long as the terms are not clear, it's very much like the previous chiefs did with the slave trade. And I think that's a bad thing. The other thing, as you have said, may have to relate with the skilling of our people. And that's why we have a number of experts here on the panel, like Dr. Catherine Mbide. They should share with us how they are planning to skill people so that even when people have not gone very far in education, so that when the country is not working as fast as the population is growing to create jobs, people can create their own jobs. So there are a number of strategies, but also I think we need to get the government back in. You know, neoliberalism told us that everyone was by themselves, roll back the state except for security purposes. As for the rest, let the free market work. So we have now markets in natural resources, we have markets in people, and people say, well, for me, I just did a brokerage. The rest is up to you. I think the state needs to come back in managing its people. So the market can work, but the market can be regulated. And we should make sure that these laws work. But basically, it goes back to giving hope to people on this continent. Africa should stop just being used as a theater of wars, because many times the wars are not even our wars, they are other people's causes. But also, most importantly, is help the Africans, we as African people, to look at the continent from a different lens. You know, we have been fed on a narrative that nothing works here and that everything works elsewhere. By the way people are going, not everything works there permanently. So it's true when you're young and you're professional, you'll actually get a good job. But also when you age there and you're in a people's home and you have no relatives, it may not necessarily be a good thing. So we need to change the narrative of Africa as a continent of doom and gloom, and everything works better that way. That's why however much you tell these people that there's a problem where you're going, they will never believe you. Because they know here we have been bewitched, God has forgotten us, so everything works everywhere, and they keep talking these things in slang, you know, you see achachika, so those kinds of things. So at the end of the day, these narratives become part of us, so African kids are being raised and are being educated to escape from the continent all the time. So that's why, and by the way, when you look at the amount of money they are investing in leaving the continent, and you said, if only they had put this kind of money in some little skill, in some little small scale business, probably they would have done something. And here I'm not just talking about Ugandans, as Captain Francis Babu said, we shouldn't just focus on Uganda. If you look at the amount of money people pay human traffickers from West Africa, sometimes from Somalia via West Africa, so as to go and pick strawberries in the Mediterranean countries, Italy, Portugal, and the like. And you know, you're going through Libya, where organ harvesting, we have been told, is high. So the chances of even making it alive is problematic. Now, the other countries that don't want you heavily pay those other governments to control the traffic from their side, and they don't care about the human rights. But the point is that the human traffickers, the agencies, whatever you want to call them, are being paid large amounts of money. Some of these people are selling land back home so as to be able to go into slavery. So if our economy worked, if we changed the narrative of Africa, and we enabled people to see hope here, they would not be struggling to live, because actually they would know that there is gold where they are coming from and going into servitude where they are going. Sorry.
And Professor, sticking with exactly what you've said, how do we get a working economy? Especially an economy that works for everyone. Imagine the biggest population in this country, 75% is, the average age is 15.9 years. How do we get an economy that works for everyone?
Well, thank you. Some years back, the World Bank made what they call the systematic country diagnostic. And at that time, they were saying 85% of our population, especially our young people, is unschooled and unskilled, okay? So therefore, it made them unemployable. So And of course, by this time they have grown and more are qualifying into their positions. So of course you have that population which is schooled but still unskilled, okay? Then you have that which is both unschooled and unskilled. And so this creates a problem that even if there are few opportunities that would be available to them, they cannot sustain them. They don't have patience, they are permanently on the move, the soft skills are not there. So this creates, and of course we have also not helped the situation by converting all the technical colleges and institutes into either universities or into nothing. So we've created more job creators than in the past, where people would have created some kind of job to survive. And here, what do I mean? If you grew up in some villages, you would see someone earning a living from making chairs, someone earning a living from making mosquito nets, and the story of the mosquito net is the most interesting one. When we grew up, there were skills of making mosquito nets in the villages. Now that skill does not exist anywhere. Mosquito nets have to be imported. So that shows you that there is a certain knowledge system which has gotten lost, okay? So one, we need to go back to skilling, whichever way. And that's why I said we are privileged that we have Dr. Kathy here. She should tell us what they are doing with skilling. But beyond that, we need more technical colleges. But also you need the government to come back and plan for its people. Captain Francis, Honorable Babu talked about the manpower survey. And of course, sometime back, we also did make jokes about this, where they were saying, where you recruit 1 Kenyan, you need 4 Tanzanians, and you need 10 Ugandans. It really makes us a kind of workforce that people would not invest in, or that people would not desire except for exploitation, like they are doing. So I think government needs to regulate. And why would this be important? Government has a national planning authority, government has the civil service, government has the education sector, and these three, if they're speaking to each other, you see how many people, civil service would tell us how many jobs are coming from there, and of course, trade and industry, okay? They'll tell you how much is being created there. Then you'd have the National Planning Authority giving us the directions like they keep giving us, but those directions should be informed by the kind of population and the kind of workforce that's coming out of the education systems. And it's not by mistake that some developed countries put the Ministry of Higher Education, Trade and Industry in one docket, because these need to speak to each other, okay? But for us, okay, we have them separated, but still they should speak to each other. But government has to be in charge. Otherwise, people will come, play, do what they can do, exploit, and go.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Honorable Nkunyinji, you as the Shadow Foreign Affairs Minister, when you look at the way we handle our foreign affairs, how much influence can we have in this labor externalization? And is there a place for it? Let's not just look at Myanmar and all, but can we have influence in how or what we bring on the table?
Principally, let me first set the record straight. Externalized laborers and Ugandans are not entirely illiterate, and they don't lack skills. Even within their regulations, those who are taken are first trained as a requirement. So we cannot tag the solution on skilling, even those back home here. Equally, we are now in the middle of the crisis. In South Africa alone, we have more than 1 million Ugandans. In UAE, I think it's estimated above 800,000 Ugandans. In Saudi, it's estimated above 500,000 Ugandans. And in other parts of the Middle East, they are in the thousands. I can't count other continents. Now, in Kaila alone, they are above 500,000 Ugandans. We already in the middle of the crisis. In the long term, you can talk about skilling, probably, but it sounds theoretical for now. And two, I wanted to clear the presumption that these people just lack skills. Whatever has happened back home here, anyone can tell from your side of the story. People are oppressed, there are no jobs, the economy is not balancing. So we have more graduates than available jobs.
I think, Honorable,
I was giving a basic background.
I understand
because we don't want to
of people that are labor that we're talking about in the Middle East and the Gulf
16,
is about
17, 18.
24 years of age.
Between 16 and 20.
And when we talk about them going there, it is, okay, maybe illiterate was on the downside, but experience with their skills. They have head knowledge of what they have regurgitated from what they've learned in school to put here. So really, does that help with the supply we're giving to the Gulf and the Middle East?
And by the way, exit to the Middle East has been largely voluntary, meaning that what these people experience before they choose to go speaks to their exit. They must be challenged in their livelihood and so many other spheres of life. So we need to appreciate that these people are forced to voluntarily surrender themselves to go to the Middle East. And that's why I was putting on record that they are not entirely unskilled. Some are graduates. Those so-called kadamas or domestic workers, some are graduates and some are fairly skilled. I would speak to what should be done, the remedies available for them. And that's why I was emphatic that let's acknowledge that we have millions of Ugandans abroad. Let me start with a case study of Philippines. From records, Philippines has more than 12 million nationals working abroad. But one of the key deliverables and strategies they have, they follow up and execute enforceable protective bilateral agreements on labor. That determines the rights of their workers and remedies in case of conflict. They even position enough labor attaches in the various destinations they have. But more importantly, all Philippines bilateral labor agreements have a minimum wage. A domestic worker, the minimum from Philippines, the minimum wage should be $400 and above. Our Ugandan workers don't have any specified wage. They are employed based on favors and decisions of the employer. And many times they are taken unaware of even which kind of wage they are going to earn. It points to part of the problem. Similarly, our regulations here, the labor regulations, when you read them, you find a number of good positions. For example, they insinuate that government is going to position labor officers at all exit airports and in all airports of the destination countries. These people are not there. 2, there has been an attempt by the regime here to propose labor attaches, but we are asking under which law? Because when you don't have a bilateral, unenforceable bilateral agreement that determines how you exchange these professionals. Because every time we put the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in fix, their excuse is one, that we are not part of the law on labor externalization. One of the solutions we need is to push forward amendment of the laws to incorporate the Ministry of Foreign Affairs into the sector of labor externalization. It is squarely run by the Ministry of Gender, which has no diplomatic presence whatsoever. When you visit most of these embassies in the Middle East, stranded and distressed Ugandans flock to these embassies. Sometimes I sympathize with them, but as many times I quarrel. 2 years ago, Parliament appropriated, I think, $5 billion to cater for runaway girls and distressed girls. And we came to Parliament to make an argument that when we were passing this $5 billion, they forgot that among the distressed there are boys. Because it wasn't gender sensitive. They are boys. When in Dubai alone, Ugandans sleep at train stations outside Union and Bania Square. In UAE, they sleep outside. No home. You find someone carrying a bag, and when you pass through UAE, you can't miss someone asking you, "Do you have a job?" Because they can't even tell whether you are also a visitor or you are stationed in UAE. Now, these are the realistic challenges of the Middle East. The question of protection, we need to follow up and fast track. Why are those who actually go with employment contracts and with the labor contracts form majority of the victims. Because many who go, they are paraded into warehouses with the promise for jobs. They actually never get these jobs. Is the Minister of Gender and probably the Minister of Foreign Affairs following up keenly in the operations of these labor recruitment companies? There's a question as to whether there is effective monitoring. Because I'm trying to deal with those who are in answering for the fate for those who are already in the Middle East. Those who are yet to go, and I want to put on record, when you visit Entebbe Airport alone, I was last year when I was in Kosase, we went to Entebbe Airport and we learned that for every passenger plane that exits Uganda to the Middle East, more than half of the passengers are domestic workers and people who are taken for labor, for whatever name you may call it. Meaning we have a bulk of Ugandans exiting to the Middle East regularly. When you go to the Middle East, most of the detention centers, some are in detentions. Now, for those who are in detention, it speaks to what kind of consular services our embassies can offer. Every time we push the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they also attribute it to finance and probably sometimes travel. As we did with the question of Middle East alone, just in DRC here, I think in every prison of DRC there is a Ugandan. I don't know whether they went for work or they went for any other reason. But the question is, who is there to speak and defend these Ugandans? In Saudi, one of the concerns we have is lack of translators, because their trials is normally in Arabic and in the Sharia courts. We don't have translators at our embassies. You know, we must also deal with the existing problem. How do we safeguard the rights of these ones? Some are detained there, some can't exit. And we must also deal with such a situation. Who is responsible? The minister will say it is the Minister of Foreign Affairs will say it is the Minister of Gender. The Minister of Gender will say we don't have a presence in those countries. It is the Minister of Foreign Affairs. We need to harmonize what is the rightful agency to regulate and make a follow-up in terms of protection. Offering consular services. Other countries issue travel advice to nationals. I've not seen any embassy of Uganda or even the ministry coming up to guide our nationals in terms of the fate as is in those other countries. Just as we speak now, we first raised it in Parliament that Ugandans a few months ago, I raised it in Parliament that Ugandans in Cairo, we are being denied exit, and there is a new fine of $500,000 imposed on them to be cleared. The minister came to Parliament and said, no, you are saying 500, but the fine is 60 million and 120 million. But I said, even if it was to be 10, is there a possibility of any of these domestic workers to meet such a fine? These domestic workers never received travel or any advice at all. We don't see advice given to these nationals, those who are already abroad, and equal to those who are still in this country. Okay. Now, the basic solution we have, let's deal with the regulations, the law, and determine who actually is responsible. 2, let's also safeguard the rights of those who are already there. Some of them may require remedial measures, including repatriation, but as well, we need also to speak to the reality that some want to remain there and work, but they want a protective environment. Our government has failed to negotiate and speak to countries of the world in terms of the welfare of our workers. I recently heard Turkey proposed a bilateral labor agreement with Uganda. There has been no follow-up by the government of Uganda on that bilateral agreement. United Kingdom offered, there's another agreement in Kofing to recruit Ugandan medical workers, professional nurses, special nurses, and at a fee. You know, these externalized laborers and workers contribute a lot to the tax regime in this country, but they receive nothing in return in terms of their protection. So the case we are making is for those domestic workers and other workers in the Middle East and in other parts of the world. They require protection. We need to empower the missions, the embassies, which are diplomatically present in those regions, but equally the distribution of these missions is questionable. You will find that, for example, in Saudi, our embassy is in Riyadh. These domestic workers are largely in other regions. The embassy will say we have no capacity to reach out to them. In UAE, our embassy is in Abu Dhabi. They have established a consulate in Dubai with no vote, and it says it lacks capacity and financial resources to actually execute its work.
Okay.
In Turkey, our embassy is in Ankara. Majority are in Istanbul. Even when they are detained, no one follows up. So we need also to answer the question of who follows up on our externalized workers, and what is the mandate of our missions, what is the mandate of the Minister of Gender and the Minister of Foreign Affairs. And as well, what is the enabling law? We are also in a lacuna of law, because the Minister of Foreign Affairs, which is diplomatically present in those countries, is not involved at all. It only gets involved in approving the host company, and it ends at that. Now, the follow-up remains questionable.
Thank you very much. Dr. Kathy, one of the things someone mentioned here is the desperation of young people.
The economy doesn't work.
And young people are just trying to find ends. Honorable Nkunyinji has talked about the money, but also, let's talk about the recruitment agencies. They charge between, say, 2 to 5 million shillings. That's about $200 to $2,000. What can a young person do with that money in this economy? You are in the innovation space. What innovation? Oh, what magic can be, like Honorable Babu likes to say, what one can be swung on this $200 and $2,000?
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much, Timothy. I would also align it to some of the global reports and statistics. Uganda, according to the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor report, Uganda is one of the most entrepreneurial economy. And one of the parameters looked at is the ability to actually start. But I also want to inform you that we also have the highest failure rates, implying that if someone started a business today, there are very high chances in 3 months they will either be closing or transforming into something else.
Especially if it's a man.
Now, there are a number of issues that we need to really put into consideration. You're looking at an age group which is really employable, 15 years to around 30 years into this export. And then it takes us back to, the country's vision, even 2040, is saying we need to transform the economy. Now that implies there is need, yes, for government to look at these young people's dreams in terms of starting, but being supported in the entire entrepreneurial ecosystem. It is 2 million. Can these young people be supported in Yumbe, in Kasese, in Kwen? They have an idea. Whatever they have started, how can we support them, provide all these shocks, okay, for them to rear their guts, to be able to start either an industry or a company, okay? Because this entrepreneurial spirit is a personal aspect. Remember we said the drive, one of the drivers as to why they are living is a personality aspect. I want to go, I want to see. And most likely, we're talking about labor externalization. They need to do something, isn't it? So if someone promises them 800,000, okay, in terms of earnings, why can't we transform this labor, okay? Yes, we may have the good laws. Why can't we go back and look at these young people's, the communities where they are coming from, and reorganize them? But we need to support them. The support must be intentional, okay? Whether, look at the current program, the DIT program, which is going out to skill the informal, the informal sector, where someone doesn't have to go to school to be a very good caterer. There are those modules. Now, these are very good programs, but they have been skilled. But when are we going to complete the entire value chain? Okay, for this young person, they may know how to do it, but it's not only the how part of it. We have a number of government agencies. Are we going to support them in starting up these enterprises? Okay, will they be able to pay? URA has to really also come in and play a very huge role. They want the taxes, but how do we support? Should we give them some kind of buffer or maybe
tax incentive?
Tax incentives, you know, and they are not aware. You know, these young people are not aware that at UIA, the investment authority, these opportunities do exist. So, but then this foreigner can actually go onto the website, visit UIA, and benefit from them. So if there is that intentional kind of support to basically go into our communities, because these young people are coming from these communities, even when we go ahead and say we are putting up laws, you know, going to sign these bilateral agreements, how about if we come up with remedies, first of all, to say, can we come up with the small industries? Can we industrialize? There is a lot, you know, we need. Look at the current ban on the potential ban on, you know, importation of second-hand clothes, and then you look at the entire skilling process of where so many have learned how to tailor, but we can't even manufacture a sewing machine. So why can't we get these young people to go into the manufacturing, build the entire value chain? Those who are going to go into the tailoring, but who is going to manufacture the sewing machines that they are going to use? Can we build an industry around that entire support system? Who is going to market this? Government is the biggest buyer. Okay? Government should be one of the key clients for the same. But remember, if it is a small enterprise, a small company, they don't have the requirements. You know, we are going to go into procurement. They cannot be listed because they are not part of the PPD and all that. So how about building, you know, before we go into the exportation or, you know, of the labor, how about looking at them from an entrepreneurial perspective? What do they love doing? What have they started? What can be supported? But we need to look at the entire value chain and all the players, you know, within the system. And then we go back to these communities and say, okay, yes, I think there is maybe an industry. Because if you are, you know, you mentioned the number of, if there are 50, you know, young people boarding a plane, how about if there are 50 young people employed in one of these industries in their communities earning 800,000? Because we are still also grappling with how much they should earn back home.
And Doctor, just a twofold question before I get to Honorable Segona there. First and foremost, as Ugandans, we do things in isolation. If you look at the entrepreneurship you were talking about there. Two, the mindset towards, you know, things of the hands is really negative there. But how do we change this? But also, as the innovation pod, what are you doing to add value to these young people so that, because we cannot externalize forever. At some point it has to stop. So what are you doing to add value to them and how are you changing the mindset there?
Okay, thank you so much. Now at the Unipod, the Unipod was set up mainly to support, to provide support mechanisms in terms of research outputs, being an academic institution. So as researchers, these are students and staff, come up with ideas, okay? These ideas are transformed into innovations, which innovations now we are taking to the market in form of commercialization. But we are also planning, moving towards setting up industries or companies from the university perspective. Now, at the Makerere University Innovation Pod, we have 10 maker spaces where things actually do happen. Now, in these maker spaces, what has been built up, a young person, a researcher, or someone from the community can come into this space and think of either a product or a service and is given support. Say in our electrical, maker space, we have the textile section. You learn how to produce that bag, to do that shoe, that design. We have a high-profile computer designs within our CAD rooms. We have a collaborative space. Young people sometimes also need spaces to allow them think, So we have a collaborative space where they're allowed to think, get other experts. We invite mentors to come into these spaces. We also have a workshop, a CNC, computerized numerical control workshop. Now this has 4 types of different computerized machines. One is metal. You know, you would use it to, it is digital. We have moved away from where you would go into a metal workshop and then you have to have so many machines, but here you design your product and then it can be digitally printed or produced within within the workshop. We also have a CNC machine which actually prints, maybe works with wood, maybe plastic. So you come up with a design of a product and then you're able to maybe be able to produce this product at the Unipod. We also have a studio to allow those who are interested in photography, in music production, in video editing, something of the sort. So this is basically the creative arts. Now you come in and learn. So learning is one point of view. But we've also observed that one of the challenge youth are faced with, you imagine you expose them to such a high-tech machinery and equipment. If they have learned how to use these machines, that is the end of the story. But now we have developed a blended model whereby they will come in and learn, maybe for a whole month, depending on the time, produce this product. But we are also now allowing them to do production, to be able to take these goods to the market and they are able to sell. Why? They don't have, even when we say that yes, they should go, someone has been skilled in tailoring, they may not even be able to buy a sewing machine. So one of our models is there is training, but there is also production. In addition to that, we are also providing services regarding intellectual property management. As they come up with these ideas, we have an officer who is in charge. We actually protect the young people's ideas, okay, in terms of their intellect, in terms of their minds, whether it's we advise them accordingly. Is it a patent? Is it a copyright? Is it a utility model? At what stage? So this kind of support is provided for by the Unipod.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you very much. Honorable Segona, when you look, I think mine is a twofold question. One, what legal regiments need to be in place to ensure that labor externalization is beneficial to the country? But also, two, what's the mandate of the embassies and high commissions in these different countries?
Well, I don't think I can do better than associating myself with my brother, Mwada Nkunyinji. I think he has done the statistical bit. He has also looked at the legal and policy framework. We need to revise the legal and policy framework, but beyond legal and policy framework, because, and especially where you're limiting legal and policy framework to agreements, bilateral agreements, because you can make a law which will have the force of law in Uganda, but it will not work elsewhere outside the borders. So you must have a policy, you must have an arrangement of agreeing with those countries and the governments, as well as those foreign companies that do employ your boys and girls. That's number one. Number two, of course, to look, to be, but also look more organized. As Nkunyinji tells you, even internally, you're not agreed on who can do what. Just internally, where you have all the powers and literally all the resources, because you're saying, I mean, the arrangement is housed under the Ministry of Gender, but you know that Ministry of Foreign Affairs has a role to play. But nobody even knows. We were in Mombasa. I was chairing Public Accounts Committee, and I was surprised. You go to Mombasa, there are so many Ugandans who get problems there at the port, and nobody knows where their embassy is. You know,
the councillor.
Yes, where the councillor sits, just close to the port, walkable distance. So I think we need to do better. We need to be, but also appear more organized locally. there is no way you can run away from the macro aspect. You did ask, I think, Sarah, what can be done? And Captain Babu said that's $1 million question.
Yeah.
Economically. I mean, are we so stuck that even locally we have run out of opportunities?
No.
We have not run out of opportunities. Instead, we have run out of ideas. How can a government that has a ministry of planning, finance, planning, and economic development, has some agency called the National Planning Authority, decide to think micro? They are talking about 5-year development plan. How can a whole country be talking about 5-year development plan? You should be talking macro, you should be talking big. Honorable Babu talked about our neighbors having Wotani. If we have identified that one of the existing gaps is scaling, we should be asking ourselves, what is it that we can do to give relevant and practical skills that can help our children, even when they go out there? For example, I was speaking to some young man. They call themselves baristas.
Yes.
These baristas who prepare coffee, tea, etc. They are in very high demand wherever they go. The training, this is somebody who can even train within 2 weeks to have that skill. Number two, instead of selling their grandparents' vivanja, to go and look for jobs on the streets of UAE. Supposing he simply sold that vivanja, went and set up a kiosk somewhere in Dubai within the laws of UAE and employ people. Number three, I know of a neighboring, poor neighboring country which sends money abroad to empower the entrepreneurs. And the first call is employing their children. I know of that neighboring country. The same neighboring country buys...
That's the Chinese method.
Exactly. The same neighboring country buys land here in Uganda, empowers her people. Farmland empowers her people to operate big farms in Uganda, to operate big malls in Kampala. What is it that we cannot do? As Chair Park, I have traveled across the continent, but also beyond the continent. If you look at the embassies that were set up by Idi Amin's government, vis-a-vis how much they were collecting, what is it that we cannot do? For example, the Kenyan government, when the Kenyans go to South Sudan, they go there to run banks, insurance companies, and big trading companies or manufacturing companies. When they go to DRC, same thing. Do you know why we are making roads in DRC? To be able to export some fish that has escaped the hands of the UPDF enforcing standards. Just to take fish, smoked fish, and sell in the markets of DRC. We risk our boys and girls go fight in DRC, and after fighting in DRC, sell fish or go around those mining, whatever's in Congo to see if you can chance on a piece of gold. Now, no country is run that way, but the backbone of our economy is agriculture. How much are we investing in agriculture? Somebody talked about modernization of agriculture some years back. I think Captain Babu was still a minister. And up until 2 years ago, the government was supplying hand hoes in a bid to modernize agriculture. When you go to some of these agencies of ours, I was in Nagrik today, I saw the wonderful work those people are doing in Entebbe. I visited this one, Naro. Yes. If you go to Namronge, if you go to Kawanda, and see the wonders our people are doing there. But how much money are we giving them?
Including plant, what they call them, to put the plants together.
Exactly. You know, they're doing a good job. But you know, if we had not protested, the next thing we were going to see was that research land being given away. When Captain Babu was growing up, and I think so was my father, we had district farm institutes.
Yes.
Where are they? We have parceled out all that land unto ourselves. We have decided to slice those acres of land into 50 by 100s. There are no functional district farm institutes. Institutes that were set up by Idi Amin 40 something or 50 years ago, we are instead selling them away. We cannot rely on an economy that we are not managing. We should shift our thinking from that so-called externalization of labor, where we have no control, to our very own. How much effort is government putting in to promote the growing of maize? Even when you see that in the neighborhood we have opportunities, enormous opportunities, you should be investing in tractors, etc. Was it the colonial government that set up Njiru model farms? Njiru model farms, where you are saying we are giving each model farmer 71 acres. There were 71 acres. 1 acre was for the installations, farm, whatever, I mean, farmhouse, stores, etc. Then the 70 acres for grazing, modern cows. What have we done when this government came? Parcel that land out unto yourselves. So forget about running economies that are not yours. If you want to go there to maximize serious opportunities for Ugandans. If you had sponsored or supported companies in the UAE, we would be taking advantage of them. But you see, you want Chinese to go and establish companies of factories in the UAE to employ your children. Where are the Chinese children going to go? So you are the last person to be thought about.
Thank you very much.
Finally,
yes.
Finally, there are even emerging opportunities we are not looking at. Recently, there's a bad situation in Gaza, for example. There is war in Palestine. Now the Israelites are closing out on Palestinians. No more Palestinians working in Israel. How much are we doing? One, to go into negotiations with such countries, and two, to skill our children from there. If you got an Israelite trained agriculturalist here, my friend, first of all, it is hard to find them. Secondly, when you get them, they are very expensive. So we would be talking about getting our children onto those farms, but we should even be orienting them into what to do when they get there, get the skills, come back here. We set up model farms along the model in those countries, train our very own children to expand the agricultural space, which we are not taking advantage of. We are surrounded by countries that are facing famine year in, year out. We cannot train our people to do modern agricultural practices and feed the neighborhood.
Thank you very much. Captain Francis Babu, a few years ago when I was at university in India, a certain country that neighbors us would take 1,000 students and pay for them courses in different universities there and repatriate them back to their own country to create substance. How do we streamline this labor externalization to benefit us as a country?
Yeah, thank you very much. I want us to separate. You know, we've been mixing a lot of things together. What is happening with human trafficking? That's where the wrong things are happening. That to me is human trafficking. That's not externalizing labor. They are human trafficking people throw them into a particular country, and then we have to run after this. Now, we need a damage control there. Now, for the ones who have gone legally into these countries, we need to establish, as you've heard from the honorable members, a certain way of working with those countries. And I wanted just to say this, that we can have a labor attaché into our embassies by asking the countries where we have our embassies to accept a labor attaché onto our embassy. Now, this would be specialized into nothing but that labor thing, and making sure that they get the minimum wages you've been talking about, the people who have gone there officially. Now, after we've done that, I want you to think very carefully. I think Uganda has to tell our people, before we even talk about others, how do you treat our domestic workers?
Exactly.
Why are we talking about Dubai? How do you treat our domestic workers here? In South Africa, they have the biggest union for domestic workers in the world. And no South African has gone to the Middle East to work as a domestic worker. Why? Because the system works in South Africa. The question I'm going to ask you, are the domestic workers in Uganda being treated well so that they don't go outside? Are we giving them a minimum wage?
No.
Are we treating them like human beings?
No.
Before you go very far, I think Ugandans have to answer that question before you talk about other people. You even beat them, you ban them, you rape them, you use them sexually.
You deny them salaries.
You deny them everything. Now there they take their passport, here you deny them food.
And rest.
So, let us think, you are talking about, domestic work. These kids, these young people would not be going anywhere if there was a system here where domestic workers are respected, they can get a minimum wage, a reasonable minimum wage, and they are looked after. But the way we treat our domestic workers, please, forgive me, is disgusting. So Ugandans, before you start talking about the Middle East, how are you treating your domestic workers? I've given you South Africa. By the way, in South Africa, if you touch a domestic worker, the whole country will be paralyzed. Their unions are so powerful that domestic workers are highly respected. And they are trained. They've got special institutions that train them. After we've talked about that, why are we talking about the Middle East? How are Ugandans treated in Southern Sudan? You know why I kept quiet for a few minutes? I wanted you people to sink in that even our own Ugandans who are nearby here, our relationship is not doing very well. Now, the labor attaché is very, very, very important because they have commercial attachés. They have other attachés in some of these embassies. We want to find out if this one can be, somebody talked about translators. Yes, we should train our foreign affairs people to be able to speak the local languages, and if possible, to get people who are trained in that language. I agree entirely on that one. Now, there is the business entrepreneurship Madam was talking about. They come from these countries. By the way, the biggest number apart from the Philippines in the Middle East are from India and Pakistan. And they have done very well in those countries. They have been mistreated before, but their countries have come to an understanding with those countries to work together. And they seem to have. We must try and understand how this is done. Now you're talking about skilling. Many years ago, our Ministry of Education tried to see how the Indians were doing it. The Indians they've got something they call the Indian Institute of Technology. This is where the Silicon City in India comes from. And they don't only train in the computers, they train across the board, including hospitality industry. The hospitality industry is the biggest in this Middle East for example. I just saw an advert the other day of Emirates Airline and a few hotels. They want people who are trained in the hospitality industry. Now, apart from that, these countries, we've got to agree, we've got to look at the level of discrimination. Do they accept us? Let us not joke about this. Let's not pretend. Will they accept our people? I met a gentleman one time in Dubai, and he told me, he said, you see, we had oil. You know, Dubai had oil, but it's finished now. But they have built what Dubai is today. He was saying, but some of your countries have got oil, like Nigeria and everywhere. Why are you coming here to look for work when you have oil? So this comes to us now as Uganda. With all the resources we have in this country, apart from agriculture, which you talked about, what are we doing about our resources so that our children do not suffer by being trafficked, trafficking them into other countries as slaves? You are talking about these young people being trafficking them there. They are not only trafficking them as workers, they are trafficking them as sexual workers. They take them to brothels. We're not free to talk about this. And there are people here, women, who take those children to those brothels. Our country should investigate this, and if they find it so, they should arrest these people. Let us not stop this business of talking about workers. The workers, in fact, are there, yes, but then there is this group that is being smuggled into this country. You know, you are talking about crossing the Mediterranean. The other day, a former economic minister of France blamed the president and said this president is opening the eyes of the Africans. You know, they've been coming here to look for work, but if we don't look out and we cannot exploit them anymore, it will be the French coming across the Mediterranean to come to Africa. They recognize we have the resources. The question is, how do we make our resources benefit our people? And we do have them.
Okay.
So you're asking me, what are the remedies? The remedy is one, tell a young man, start a program where the young man is sensitized that the land they are selling increases in value, the border they are buying depreciates in value.
Exactly.
Tell them the land you are selling can make you go up. The money you take to the Middle East to look for a job will never come back again. So we need to explain it to our people. We need to sensitize Ugandans. And then these movies you are taking all over the place, this Bibanda, they call them Bibanda, where they are showing, they are giving these people false hope. They show you Europe as if it is paved with gold. They show you the America is paved with gold. They show you the Middle East. They show you those tall buildings. They don't show you where these poor people sleep like goats. So I think time has come for us to sensitize our people that if you have a piece of land, how can we help you to develop it? You're talking about the agriculture, by the way. The government did buy the equipment to modernize agriculture. People did not implement them and they stole them.
Okay. Thank you very much, Captain Francis Babu. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to almost the end, so I'll give you parting shots of each a minute. I'll start with Professor, then I'll go to the Honorable Dr. Kathy, Honorable Medad, and finally Captain Francis Babu. I'll start with you, Professor.
Thank you very much, Timothy. It has been an interesting discussion, but basically I can summarize it like this. Dr. Kathy spoke about an ecosystem. I would like to look at these things as a pipeline. The people in the Middle East are not just in the Middle East. The people crossing the Mediterranean are not just there. The excellent people who are working professional jobs in North America and wherever else are not just there. There's a pipeline that produces these people. Can we put right ingredients? Keeps going up and government's not in charge of things. We are simply increasing on the pipeline for desperate people who are going to look for opportunities outside this country and live and sometimes end up in servitude. The other way we can do is, if those, and for those who have managed to start something, you know, we are a very entrepreneurial country, but many SMEs don't see their first birthday, and even many that survive the first birthday don't see the fifth birthday. We need to continue skilling, create more vocational tracks alongside the high-level academic tracks, but also for those that have started, can we reduce the taxation for them? Can we reduce the taxation on the equipment that is needed for these young people, depending on what the National Planning Authority Trade Industry is going to see as the key driver for the economy? I think that will be good. And finally, let us not forget rethinking Africa from an African perspective. This ability of always looking for other people's knowledge and other people's equipment to develop Africa, they don't want you to catch up. That's why they're talking about the French minister. They will ensure you remain in servitude, but also let's celebrate and focus more on the blacks who are excelling. There are many programs on the continent, Black Excellence, that are celebrating Africans that have made it and that are creating the narrative. The Tony Elemelus, the Vista Muluanas, and all the rest. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Honorable Nkunyinji.
An economy that has failed for 40 years cannot improve tomorrow. You have to be realistic. We are where we are because everything has failed. We own a country where there is a balance. But as we speak, we have so many universities, so many institutions, so many skilling centers. Are the graduates employed? The answer is no. Indeed, it will still remain open for our youth and many Ugandans to exit for better opportunities in other parts of the world. And equally, when we are talking about the other parts of the world, let's look at the GDP per capita and look at the would-be benefits when this people exit. Let's realize and accept that labor externalization is a reality. That's why when the doors were opened, you can see the influx of applicants. For now, those who engage in sensitization can try it, but what is crucial is that it's a reality. We can only now work on one, harmonizing the process, which require revisiting the regulatory framework, to bringing on board various players with capacity to actually offer the safeguards. People and nationals working abroad wouldn't be the problem. It has become a problem because their rights are not safeguarded and are not protected. That's why for a few cases where we have successful employment, there are also success stories to tell.
Okay.
But the bulk of the victims points at inadequacy in safeguards. We need to empower our missions. We need to empower probably the Ministry of Gender and Ministry of Foreign Affairs with the enabling law. We need to see government following up keenly to negotiate with countries over the world, because most of our externalized laborers are in known destinations where we think government has capacity to fast track and engage these countries for better protection, for their rights, and even in eventualities, for remedies while in those countries. Otherwise, Uganda is on one continent, the other countries are also scattered across continents. Ugandans exit, some voluntarily, and some are trafficked. For the victims of trafficking, it is entirely caused by this regime and by government, because the people can't control borders. And information disseminated to these people are from legitimate companies. Where there is inaction by a government to protect its citizens, where there is no advice, we have to blame government for failure to protect its citizens. Otherwise, where we are, I want to promise and pledge as a shadow minister and for us as opposition, we stand with Ugandans both at home and those abroad, and we believe that the existence of embassies is promote international cooperation. Where our nationals go, they must equally be protected. They must get the relevant services. They also contribute to our economy.
Thank you, Honorable. Honorable, let's leave it at that for now. Dr. Kathy.
Thank you so much, Timothy. Yeah, one, I think critical we need to be data, actual data in terms of what jobs are needed to be able to create the kinds of industry so that we create the systems back home to actually avoid the influx in terms of the labor. So if we have better opportunities back home, so all the systems working together, the different players working together, then yes, we shall be able to at least reduce on this externalization of labor.
Thank you very much. Honorable Medad.
I like the word Kathy used earlier, ecosystem. You know, this thing cannot be discussed in isolation.
Yes.
We need to have a wholesome discussion on how to run, govern, and manage our country. A country that is battling and struggling with very basic things as to whether you can have a leader who leaves and another one comes peacefully. I've been following, somebody sent me a clip from Dokolo where they were throwing yellow t-shirts and people were literally fighting. There's a woman who was really rolled down and, you know, she was only saved by the police just to get one t-shirt. You cannot discuss what you call externalization of labor in isolation of all other prevailing circumstances where we have found ourselves. Captain Babu said, you know, we must distinguish between externalization and what he called
trafficking.
Well, you know, let's be candid. There are certain words I cannot use as a sitting member of parliament because they will be said not to be diplomatic. But I can tell you, I think we must re-look for ourselves, find ourselves, and agree. There are certain things which are very, very basic that we need to do. Finally, when we are putting people in positions, let us go for the best. Let us not go for those we are related to. I mean, right from minister, there are minister colleagues of mine I look at and I said, what did this man or woman do to General Museveni? For you to keep this kind of person here, causing them to suffer. The man cannot move by himself, the woman cannot move by herself, but you're giving them to run something I think Dr. Sali talked about, where you need to combine, say, Ministry of Education, trade industry, and I looked at the situation, I said, oh, who is heading which ministry? Which of these two?
Thank you, Honorable. Finally, Captain Francis Babu.
I'm going to use a country called Singapore, where they trained all the citizens that they did not have people to do the low-level jobs. So they started employing people from other countries. He used three letters. The word was MPH. The M stands for meritocracy, put the right people in the right positions. 2, be pragmatic about life. Lastly, be honest. With that, I think if we can follow those, we can change this country.
Thank you very much. Let me read just about 5 of those to be able to get it as a morning. Timothy, thank you for the discussion from all the guests, but no one is talking about the low self-esteem in African setting. When an African sees a pink-skinned person, we call them whites, they lose all their guard. There's a lot of lack of mentorship and too much corruption. Plus, government gives foreigners...
That's an abuse, please. We must withdraw.
Free tax benefits.
I trained white people.
Which largely benefits the country of origin instead of the investors. This is Timothy from Seguku. Okay. Good evening. This is Dickens from Arua City. Labor externalization has enormous forward and backward linkages to other businesses in the private sector. Labor externalization, if prudently dealt with and managed as a country, presents socio-economic potential for the country. The onus is on the government to discover such potential other than politicking. Workers must be seen as important or part of the production system here. Also the development of the country, even as we have mentioned, the National Planning Authority. Finally, government should allocate security personnel that follow up the contracts of particular labor export companies. This will help track down the employer and the employees in case of any problems. The US allocates a security officer on each and every after attack. So we are ready for any attack, and let us track every contract. The recruiters must pay all the facilitation fees This is Peter Pius Chizito. Thank you very much for all your feedback. Tomorrow the Dokolo Woman MP by-election will be happening, but also today morning, we're already past midnight.
Yes.
It will be happening, and also the UPDF has given us a bit of warnings about the ADF in the country, so please be very observant as you move around, be security conscious. We'll end with this quote: luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. Good morning.
Good morning.
UBC, inspiring Uganda.
Amina gange ndetibona Kiranda Amina mu company eya WIB Uganda Limited ndi member. Wemba member company eno weyeida twalinga tutuli bulungi ng'abakyala abe wakawaka. Ng'abakyala abe wakawaka tuemera ku baami baife nga bonkana abajamu nanda nga twidi nti abakyala tebakozesa ki nanda. UN Women weyeida yatuteekateeka yatwegesa okulunda engege ng'abakyala. Twatandika beno okudulunda n'okudirisa n'okolaki twafunamu ng'abakyala aba Bugiri district. Abakyala ba Bugiri district sofa tuli abakyala 14 abakola project eya WIB. Abakyala 14 twayawula mu sectors. Mulimu abakyala ba production abaliisa, mwaba abakyala ba validation abongera engege omutindo bayongerako omutindo, twaba n'abakyala ba harvesting abaharvestinga, twaba n'abakyala abakola aba marketing. Sector donna diri trained era didi kyedikola ki kyedikola. Project eno tufunyemu ng'abakyala. Government yaife ne ya Uganda njebaza okujja kujanga batulingirira mu ng'abakyala abana Uganda. Eri kujanga eturobingira ebibiina bingi. We have UWEB, baleta parish development model, we have Myoga. Byonna biri kwida muki mu bakyala oba mu bantu abaki aba Uganda.
Mukoke Fish Farmers Association tuli balunzi ba byananda ebyebika ebisatu omuli